Patagonia. How do you get there? How do you get around? What places should you visit? What do you expect to see? And if you're thinking about hiking, how fit do you need to be to go on hikes? All that and more coming up right now. I decided I was going to go to Patagonia about 6 months out, and I booked the airfare then, but unfortunately I didn't book the accommodation at Torres del Paine until about 4.5 months prior to arrival, and that was leaving it a little bit late because dates quickly become unavailable and your limitations on what you can do and when you can do it evaporate pretty quickly. So a recommendation is to book that as early as possible if you're intending to do that. Once I'd got those dates locked in though, then the rest of the itinerary pretty much centered around the hiking in Torres del Paine. Just jumping ahead to a summary, it's probably not the way I'd do it in hindsight, but I'll talk a little bit more about that as the video progresses. Given the itinerary I had, I decided to start from Ushuaia, and to get there I flew from Santiago to Buenos Aires, then down to Calafate and into Ushuaia. So it was a one-day trip, 3 flights, took me about 12 hours all up. Other ways you can get there, you can get in and out of Ushuaia by bus from Punta Arenas and from Calafate. And also there's cruise ships that come in and out of Ushuaia. Unfortunately, no direct flights between Santiago and Ushuaia. There's plenty to do in Ushuaia, but gee, it's an expensive place. You'll be in for a bit of a shock if you hadn't been prepared for the sort of prices you're going to encounter, particularly in restaurants and supermarkets. I was told to try the crab by someone who'd been there a few years previously, but that was way outside of my price range. And interestingly, I'd watched a lot of vlogs here on YouTube prior to arriving. Most of them, though, were from 18 months to 2 years prior to my arrival, and it seemed like the prices in US dollars had doubled in that time. And I did actually meet a guide from one of the tour agencies there one day. His group had a free day, so they were off doing other things. And I was talking to him. We were knocking on a door at a restaurant at opening time, so we end up sitting there and having a meal together. And he was telling me the same thing, that prices have pretty much doubled in the last 2 years. So it's become a very expensive place to have a holiday. Food there is fantastic, though. I didn't try the crab, but there's plenty of meat for you to try. Even if you're in an apartment where you've got your own cooking facilities, you'll find that the local mini-marts have got shelves and shelves of meat. Meat's a big thing there. Not just the beef. In the southern parts of Patagonia, lamb's a big thing as well, because it's sheep country in a lot of those areas. So what do you do in Ushuaia? Well, there's hiking trails. I hiked up to Marshall Glacier. There is another great hiking trail apparently to a lake just outside of town. You need a shuttle to get to that one. I didn't do that. I had a bit of a sore ankle after the Marshall Glacier hike. Marshall Glacier is not quite free. You've got to pay about a $10 entrance fee to the park. Other than that, though, you can do that from town. The Beagle Channel is a nice boat trip just to get out on the water and look back on the town and the mountains. Penguin tours are also very popular. Now, down on the docks, you'll see 12, 13, 14 kiosks selling tour tickets. They'll all sell you a penguin tour, but beware, there's only one that sells you a tour that allows you onto the island to actually walk amongst the penguins. All the others are going to sell you a boat trip where the boat just drops anchor off the island and you have to watch the penguins from the boat. So pirate tour is the one you need to look for to get on the island and actually walk with the penguins. There's also hiking and things to do in Tierra del Fuego National Park. Now, getting out of Ushuaia, I took a bus to Punta Arenas. The buses leave every other day, so they go up to Punta Arenas, then turn around and come back the next day. You want to book, a day or two ahead just to make sure that you're going to get a seat. Don't worry about seat choices. The scenery's pretty bland, to be honest, so there's no urgency there in getting a window seat or anything. It's advertised as a 12-hour bus ride, but just be aware that 12 hours can blow out quite a bit. In my case, we had high winds at Magellan Strait that left us sitting there for 5.5 hours. So you've got to get a car ferry across. It's a 4-kilometre stretch, and the winds were preventing the car ferry from operating. So 12-hour bus trip ended up being 16 or 17 hours. That bus, though, just interestingly, did have really high-speed internet. So if you've got a streaming subscription, then you're in luck. You'll be able to watch lots of movies along the way. So Punta Arenas gives you a few more options in terms of getting in and out. There's multiple flights a day from Santiago, regular buses running to and from Puerto Natales, and I've already mentioned the bus from Ushuaia. There's also cruise ships that come in semi-regularly as well. I only spent a couple of days in Punta Arenas. Didn't really appeal to me too much, to be honest. You can do a penguin trip there as well, but having already done that in Ushuaia, I didn't do that, so I can't comment on how interesting that would be. There are some nice views along the waterfront and some good historical landmarks. In particular, I like the monument to the rescue of Shackleton's men. If you know that story, they got stranded on an island for quite some time and eventually were rescued. So from Punta Arenas, I took the bus up to Puerto Natales. It's a 2.5, 3-hour bus. Multiple buses per day. You don't need to book ahead for that. Maybe I just booked my ticket the day before. Puerto Natales, probably not a lot to do there either. Nice waterfront with some good views. Some fantastic lamb. If you like lamb, I'd recommend trying out the lamb there. I had some before I went hiking and then had another go at it when I came back. But I think the main attraction of Puerto Natales is really for people who are going hiking in Torres del Paine. Cruise ships that are visiting the Chilean fjords also dock in Puerto Natales as well. So Puerto Natales was my base, so I could then do the W trek in Torres del Paine. So as I mentioned earlier, I'd booked this months in advance. This is the downside of pre-booking. Pre-booking is a must. You can't really do this trek otherwise. But the problem with pre-booking is you can't predict the weather. And we had terrible weather on the first day. Rain, snow, sleet, you name it. And so when we got to the iconic Mirador, which is the three peaks, the three towers, you couldn't see anything for ages. Was it worth it? Don't think so. Now, I was about to leave, and fortunately the weather just cleared for a short time, just to expose the three towers for a little while, just so you can get the classic tourist picture. But yeah, it was a miserable day, and that's the pitfall of pre-booking. So with hindsight, I wouldn't do it that way. You can do day one, which is the hike to Mirador Torres, as a day trip from Puerto Natales. It's a very long day trip because the bus is 2.5 or 3 hours just to get to the national park. The hike is going to take you 8 to 10 hours, depending on your fitness level, and then of course it's going to be another 2.5 hours, 3 hours to get back. So it's a very long day. But the advantage of doing it that way is that you can choose your weather. You can have a look at the weather forecast. Yeah, the weather's going to be great this day or 2 days out, and then book your hike accordingly. So with the benefit of hindsight, that's the way I'd do it. And there were quite a lot of seniors hiking on day one. Didn't see them on day 2 or day 3. So I think they must have been doing that 1-day trip as well. If I was only going to do the Mirador Torres hike, I'd probably just take the bus. It's a long day, but I'd just get it done that day. But if I wanted to explore other parts of the national park, I think with the benefit of hindsight, what I'd probably do is rent a car and drive around and do a few shorter hikes and do it that way. And you can drive to the park and do the Mirador Torres hike as well. There's plenty of parking available. So hindsight's 2020. Look, I'm glad I did the multi-day hike, but it was really, my opinion of it was coloured by the really bad weather on the first day. And, you know, even on the second and third and whatever day, it wasn't fantastic either. It was certainly better than the first day. We didn't have any rain than the other days. But that did colour my view of the entire expedition and the pre-booking. So from Puerto Natales, it was off to El Calafate. That's about a 7-hour bus trip. Probably want to book that a day or two ahead. From memory, there might have been 4 or 5 buses leaving a day. The bus trip is, or the length of the bus trip's dictated by how long it takes to get through customs and immigration. And for us, it took about well over an hour. I don't know why. They just seem to have a real bottleneck at each of the borders or each of the immigration offices. So as I said earlier, you can also get to El Calafate by bus from Ushuaia and by plane from Buenos Aires and Ushuaia. I think also I did see somewhere that there are occasional flights, charter flights from Santiago to El Calafate as well. You might just want to check Google Flights or something on that. I don't think they're regular. I think they're just sort of ad hoc. Yeah, look, I wasn't really enamoured to El Calafate. I didn't think a real lot of it. But the reason to be there, apart from heading off to El Chalten afterwards, is so you can see Perito Moreno Glacier, which is just amazing. It's a day trip from El Calafate, and that's the thing to do when you're in the town. It's just a fantastic trip. It's only about an hour bus trip from the town. Once you get there, you'll see that there's around about 5 kilometres of boardwalks for you to walk around and view the glacier from many different angles. I just walked up and down the boardwalks, but other things you can do when you get there is you can take a boat trip. Just get you out on a boat closer to the glacier. To be honest, it's not that much closer, but nevertheless it is closer. And you can do a glacier hike where over on the south side, I think it is, of the glacier, the boat pulls up and you can get crampons on and walk along the glacier for a little way, which I didn't do either. But look, even just from the boardwalk, it's amazing, and you get to see and hear large chunks of ice breaking off the glacier and crashing into the lake. It's just a fantastic journey. Now, the glacier is part of the Los Glaciers National Park, so there's a park entry fee to get in. And if you're going on to El Chalten, that is also part of the same national park. So you'll find that several of the hikes that you may want to do from El Chalten require park entry. So therefore, if you're visiting the glacier and then intending to go on to El Chalten, or going the other way, starting from El Chalten and heading down to El Calafate, then I'd recommend getting a multi-day park entry rather than keep paying a single entry each time you go in. Now, getting up to El Chalten from El Calafate, it's about a 3-hour bus ride. Again, no need to pre-book, just grab a ticket the day before, multiple buses running every day. If it looks like being good weather, then try and get a seat at the bus at the top, right at the front. So it's almost like being in a a big IMAX. Um, and that might be one reason why you might want to book a ticket a little bit earlier so you can grab that seat. And the reason is the last 30 or 40 minutes of that bus ride, you just get some fantastic scenery. So if you can position yourself right up the front there, that would be ideal. If you can't, well, that's okay. Once you get to Chalten, you're going to be hiking and seeing all these things up close as well. Accommodation in Chalten, it is a very tiny town, and in peak season, everyone's there to go hiking because it's such a fantastic place. So it's probably the one place out of all the places I went to, this is the one place where you're probably going to need to book early just to make sure that you're going to get something suitable for the times that you're going to be there. It's a very tiny town, and there's swarms of hikers in peak season. So just make a note of that. If you expect to turn up a day or two prior and find somewhere, you might be in for a bit of a shock. You might be shocked by the prices as well, by the way. So this place really is the hiking capital. All the trails, well, not all the trails, most of the trailheads are right on the edge of town. So there's no need for taxis, Ubers, buses, rental vehicles or anything like that in order to get you hiking. You can just walk out of your lodge or hotel or whatever, and a short walk will find you at the trailheads. So it's just fantastic from that point of view. There are a few other hikes just a little bit out of town where you may need to get a shuttle or taxi or that, but they're only a few kilometres down the road. It's not like a 1 hour bus trip or anything like that to get you there. With the benefit of hindsight, I would have, knowing what I know now, I'd stay a lot longer. I was only there for 2 full days, 4 days all up, 3 nights, 4 days, but only 2 full days. And yeah, I think if you're keen on hiking, I'd be looking, 4 or 5 days, something like that. Now, fortunately, I was blessed with really good weather when I was there as well, so I was able to do the 2 hikes that I wanted to do on the days I was there. And those 2 hikes are the Laguna de los Tres Trail, which is otherwise known as the Mount Fitzroy hike, and Laguna Torre trail, which I did on my first day there and did the Mount Fitzroy hike on the second day. I did it in that order because my landlord suggested that the weather, or there'd be less cloud for Mount Fitzroy on the second day, and that turned out to be fantastic advice. Now, both of these trails cater for different fitness levels. They're both very flat trails, actually. And in fact, the Laguna Torre Trail is described as medium, and Laguna de los Tres, the Mount Fitzroy hike, described as difficult. I think those ratings are in part due to the length, though. So Laguna Torre is an 18-kilometre round trip. Mount Fitzroy is 20-kilometre round trip. Mount Fitzroy is probably the first 9 of the 10 kilometres to get to the top. Was probably the easiest hike I've done in Patagonia by some measure. However, the last kilometre made up for that. That was probably the hardest by far. I think the last kilometre took an hour or something like that. You're basically a mountain goat, just climbing up over boulders and going up a steep rise, which you do also at to get to Mirador Torre at Torres del Paine, but it's even worse on this one. So just be aware of that. But, there's plenty of seniors doing these trails. Now, obviously for the flat bits, that makes it very easy, but nevertheless, there's certainly plenty of seniors making it all the way up the top. So if you're thinking of doing it, if you're a little bit older, maybe your fitness level is not what it used to be when you're a bit younger, don't be put off. You can do it. They're all doing it. I did it. So can you. The other thing about those 2 hikes, the Laguna Torres hike, There's a stream where you can fill up with water along the way, about halfway. And on the Mount Fitzroy hike from the 6K to about the 9K mark, there's plenty of streams where you can fill up with water. Safe to drink, just glacier water basically. I was going to say it tastes great, but it doesn't have a taste, so that's one of the reasons it's great. It's just fantastic, fresh glacier water. Probably the only other thing to say is, I guess I've already implied it by talking about how busy our Chalten gets with hikers. So these trails are very busy trails. There certainly are some bottlenecks where it's like peak hour commuting to work. So nevertheless, though, once you arrive at the destination, sure, there's a lot of people up there, and I've seen some vlogs on here that are critical, saying it's a little bit disappointing. Well, get a grip. It's nature. We all want to enjoy it. Yeah, the trails can get a little bit busy, but once you get to the destination, there's plenty of room for everyone to spread out, have your own space, where you can just reflect on nature, have a bite to eat, do whatever you want to do. It's certainly not crowded once you get up to the top, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's not like going to the Louvre and pushing everyone out of the way so you can see Mona Lisa. It's nothing like that. There's plenty of space for everyone once you get up the top, but it's just that the trails can be a little bit busy. But generally speaking, you just ask people to move aside, permiso if they're Spanish speakers and coming through, or something like that. If they're English speakers, people get out of your way and pass by. So yeah, I mean, these are busy trails for a reason, because they're so fantastic. So yeah, definitely make El Chalten a real big priority if you're visiting Patagonia. So just overall reflections. I think normally my method of travelling is generally to try and be as flexible as possible, and that was taken away from me by the need to have to pre-book dates for the W trek at Torres del Paine. And as I've already said, with the benefit of hindsight, I wouldn't do that hike, primarily because pre-booking means you're locked into certain dates. The weather is very fickle. You don't know what you're going to get. And I'd much prefer to have the flexibility of basing myself in Puerto Natales, renting a car or just taking buses, and choosing when to go and when to hike based on looking out the window and having a look at what the weather's like, or having a look at the 2 or 3 day forecasts in advance. That's certainly the way I'd do it, and that would be my recommendation. And build that flexibility all the way through your trip, rather than have to plan everything around something that you've pre-booked. So that would probably be the only takeaway, I'd say. Certainly, to each their own. And the other thing, of course, is hiking. I did prepare for it. I'm a regular hiker, and I ensured that I have had a reasonable fitness level, but there's something for everyone in these hikes. And there was all sorts of fitness levels, all sorts of ages. So regardless of who you are, what you've been doing, how old you are, I'd say go for it. Definitely do the hikes. Probably the best preparation I would suggest would be trying to walk some hills and get your knees bulletproof prior to going. Particularly for me, I find going downhill a little bit harder on the knees. So if you haven't got any hills in your areas, maybe try and find a building and get up and down stairs a lot. Just prepare your knees, and just whatever aerobic exercise works for you. But you do that preparation and you'll find this is just going to be a fantastic holiday. So with that, I'll leave it there. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.